Mandatory OTAs started today, which means football's this much closer to being back. Suneil and I are going to talk about it all next. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And tonight is Tuesday. You know what that means?
Tacos.
Club's going up. Tacos. And Suneil wearing a lumberjack shirt on the show.
We never made it to the hat part.
We didn't.
I'm gonna still rock the half sleeve hoodie.
There we go. I love it. Absolutely love it. Listen, all these. Zach's tapping in. We got Raph tapping in. Bay Area Baller making use of the customized gifts that he gets for being a member of the channel. What's up, Bay? How you doing, man? And looks like we got Charles Hayes tapping in. Big day today, Suneil. OTA started, but we haven't been on, I believe, for 2 weeks because the Warriors got in the way. Shout out to the Warriors fans. I know you guys are excited, on the verge of another championship, as it seems. But with that being said, a lot's happened in the 2 weeks. So before we get into the OTA stuff, I've got to pick your brain on the Alex Mack stuff. He's retired since the last time that we talked. That's kind of a big deal. And I know that you and I have talked a lot about the offensive line, specifically what was going to happen with Mack. Were we worried? Were we not? And I know that you wanted to pump the brakes as far as being worried about the offensive line. But now that Alex Mack is gone, he was a Pro Bowl center last year. You lost your Pro Bowl left guard. Where is your panic meter at now? If it's even registering, Suneil, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, panic meter, what we're doing, scale of like 0 to 10? 0
Let's
being
go 0
no
to
panic.
10. Yeah, no panic. Yeah.
So it was 0, and now maybe it's at like 1. Like, just because, it is a question mark. But so here's the thing. I've seen Daniel Brunskill play center in 2020 for 8 games, right? And in those 8 games, I put it up on Twitter. Thanks to guys like Rich Madrid for tapping in with stats that I didn't have. But I knew that, Brunskill didn't have like terrible numbers, right? In the 8 games he started, he allowed 1 sack. I think it was something around 15 pressures or something like that. And that was with the unathletic quarterback and Nick Mullins back there. So I was looking at it like, okay, well, if Brunskill's there, he's not going to necessarily be Pro Bowl level, but he's not going to be the worst either. He's going to give you enough. But the thing that I learned it's not that I learned. I just missed it. Was Brendel opted out that year. So I was thinking that that Brunskill won that position over Brendel, and that's why Brendel didn't play that season. I forgot that he had opted out. So by all things that I'm hearing, by what the team is stating, obviously him and Trey have a really good relationship because they've worked so much together since Trey's been here, because Brendel's been a part of the second team, as has Trey. It really seems like it's going to be a seamless transition with Brendel. Now, is he going to be a Pro Bowler? I don't know, but I do know that he's really athletic. I do know he has great chemistry with Trey Lance, and he's somebody who's made the team multiple years and probably would have started where Brunskill started if he didn't opt out that year. So for me, obviously Aaron Banks is moving into left guard. He seems to be doing all right. Brendel seems to be everything that they're looking for at center, and it's still going to be Brunskill, and we're going to have McGlinchey with obviously Trent anchoring it on the left side. So to me, I'm not too panicked. Jesse. I think that this offensive line will be fine, and there's enough depth that if people get nicked up here and there. There's people to move in. So I'm okay. I'm a 1.
Okay. All right. Well, before I give you my panic, we'll call it the panic-o-meter. I don't know. It just sounds like it should be in the right place. All right. Before I get to my panic-o-meter, we've got a couple questions. 9 Drinks wants to know if Deebo was at OTAs. Yes, he was there. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit more in depth about this one. Actually, no, excuse me. This one here. So stay tuned. We were definitely going to talk about Trey Lance. Him being on fire, it seems, early on into the offseason. And then Toby asked a question. How many total touchdowns for Trey this year? I'll give my answer to this first, and then Suneil, you can give yours if you're feeling a little froggy here. But I'm going to go, let's see, I'm going to say 28 passing, 7 rushing, so 35 total for Trey Lance.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. I think he's gonna end up with over 30, maybe 32 touchdowns passing, and I'll go with maybe 8 to 10 rushing. So let's go with 40 combined.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right. Hey, optimistic Suneil is in the house. Let's get it. My goodness sakes.
Well, if you look at it over a 17-game season, if he's averaging just 2 touchdowns per game, that's 34, right? So you got to imagine that so 40, I'm thinking it's a little over 2 touchdowns per game, which arm and feet, you would expect, that's not unreasonable. It's a 17-game season, so 40 is not as crazy as it was previously.
No, that's true. But 40 is a lot. Did Josh Allen even have 40 total last year? I'd have to look, but I feel like that's pretty high. Maybe I'm wrong. Either way, if he gets 40, if he gets 35, I'm feeling good about it. Toby, I don't know if you're accustomed to this, but around here we give love anytime somebody donates. So here is how we show appreciation. All right. Alex Mack, the panic meter on Alex Mack retiring. Before we get into the OTA stuff today, for me, I'm at a 4. I think I love the optimism, Suneil. I really do. And certainly things can go really well. And I want to point this out because in a private chat, this was actually a few weeks ago, you said this to me, and I thought it was a really good comparison. You talked about the 2011 49ers, I believe, where they had 2 second-year offensive linemen that really showed out that year. They had their anchor at left tackle. Now, they did bring in a veteran center. I think that's a big difference between that line and this line. But I think your overall point is you never know. Sometimes there's question marks, and maybe those question marks all are good. And the offensive line's going to be just fine.
And one more thing, the right tackle came off of a season-ending injury the year before, only was able to play 7 games. So very similar to how this is with McGlinchey, coming off of a season-ending injury as well. So that's where it is. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to
that's good.
Point out as many consistencies as they were.
I like it. But if I'm not mistaken, both of those guys were either first-round picks, or one was a first, one was a second. They were both first. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a lot more talent coming out. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but, a little bit higher expectations for those types of guys. And they both did play some their rookie years versus Banks has not. And Brendel really hasn't played much football. He's been around on a lot of practice squads, but hasn't taken a lot of snaps. I will say this. I think Brunskill staying at right guard is good. I would rather have them figure out a new center, and it sounds like Brendel's going to be that guy, barring somebody else winning the job. But instead of moving Brunskill and shuffling everything, Brunskill's comfortable at right guard, right? So allow him to stay there. Try to have as much continuity as possible along the offensive line, and that will help them going forward. So I'm not overly panicked, but I am at a 4, which is higher than you. We'll see how it plays out. Luckily, they knew very early on. It's not like Alex Mack was there and got injured a week before the season started or something crazy like that, right? It could always be worse, but I think that there is some cause for concern, and mainly because the guy that's starting at quarterback, this is his first year starting. You don't ever want the offensive line in front of him to be in shambles. So that's where my concern comes in. There's a lot to process already when you're a young quarterback making your first real starts outside of a couple last year. And so with that in place, that's where the worry comes in a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that new doesn't necessarily mean worse, right? So Alex Mack was new last season, but for some reason, him coming in, nobody has too much worry because it's Alex Mack. He's he's been part of the system. He's been a pro and all these kind of things. Well, Brendel's been part of the system for 3 years as well. Like, he's not new either. He's just unknown, right? And I think for some reason, it's really easy to create this narrative that unknown means worse, right? There's a lot of people that are coming out and just being like, for sure, this offensive line is worse. And I'm just not ready to say that. I mean, Aaron Banks is a second round draft pick. So when you're talking about premier talent, that's a premier talent. When you talk about what the 49ers are asking out of a center, we're getting probably the most athletic center that we've had in quite a bit of time in Brendel, whose athleticism is off the charts when you look at what he graded during his pro days and combines and stuff like that. So, those are the two positions that are changing. I think we're going to get an upgrade at right tackle with McGlinchey there. I just don't know where. I understand that it's unknown, but I'm not comfortable saying that it's worse because as much as we're worried about the offensive line, don't you think Kyle Shanahan understands how important his offensive line is to his offense, running a tag, brand new quarterback, all that kind of stuff? The fact that they didn't panic and go get a JC Treader or draft high for a center and all these kinds of things. Like, at this point, I'm kind of secure with, if Shanahan isn't worried about it, I'm not worried about it, because the last 3 years, this team has been, top 4, been to a Super Bowl. At this point, how many times are we going to keep questioning what Shanahan knows about the players on his team?
And that's totally fair. I'm going to push back a little bit, but first let me agree with you in saying that you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean worse. It just doesn't mean better either. And it
Correct.
could be the same. I mean, it's just an unknown is what it is, right? And I think in life, anytime you have an unknown, it brings a lot of anxiety to people, like just life in general, right? When you don't know. And then once you go through it, you end up usually looking back and saying, oh, that wasn't that bad, right? Why was I so worked up? Why was I so frantic about the situation? And I think that's where we're at. And I'm not going full panic mode, right? But as far as is the thing on Shanahan, I think that's a fair thing to say. But let me bring you back to just a year ago. They weren't too worried about the corner position last year either. And I remember all offseason, I don't remember where you stood on that, but I remember saying, man, if Verrett goes down, I said Verrett was the single most important player preseason to the 49ers. Not the best player, but the most important player, because if he went down, which was very likely based off of his history, that they would be in trouble. And they were in trouble. Luckily, they were able to overcome it, and it didn't end up necessarily mattering in the end. But early on, they were certainly in trouble because of it. And so I think coaches are certainly going to show a vote of confidence for the guys in the locker room. You're not going to say, oh, yeah, no, man, I think we're kind of screwed here. We didn't expect Mack to retire. We have no contingency plan. But I want to bring this up as well, because I found this quote very interesting. When Alex Mack retired, both Shanahan and Lynch said that the center position is the heartbeat of the offense. Okay, that sounds great and all, but you've had musical chairs being played at the center position since you took over this team. So if that's the heartbeat of your offense, it's a little weird that you haven't found a mainstay center in 6 years now that we're going on of this regime. So again, not full panic, but I don't necessarily trust what they're trying to feed us with this either. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, but once again, I think that maybe they have, right? Maybe it's been Brendel, But when you get an opportunity to get a guy like Mack, especially when Brendel opted out the season before, maybe, you make that move because Brendel's a full year removed from football rather than him starting. Well, now he's a full year. He was on the team all last year, mentored by Alex Mack. Now maybe he's ready to be the heir apparent, which is why it is. And to go back to what you kind of said is when you say Shanahan wasn't too worried about the cornerback position, I think that Shanahan understands how his team could win. And so there's calculated risks that you take, right? Maybe you gotta, because you stack the D line and linebackers and safeties, you can't stack the corners as much, right? And it ended up working because it was easier with the personnel that they had to have weaker corners than have weaker safeties or weaker linebackers or weaker defensive line, which ended up being where they put most of their assets and who they brought back and who they, got through free agency. So that's what I'm talking about is like Shanahan, I think at this point has proven that he knows how to win with his team. Now, obviously people are going to say, well, he hasn't won a Super Bowl, but okay, a lot of coaches haven't, but he puts together a team that is competitive, at least these last 3 seasons. And I have a lot of faith. I'm back to being a Shannon stan. I know you guys got me off of the fence for a little bit. And I have to say, Shanahan, I'm apologizing for ever doubting you, but I'm back to being a Shannon stan. And I just trust. I mean, this offensive line was top 10 last season. They are losing, 40% of it. So I understand the concern, but I just think that this team does a really great job, like thinking ahead, having guys that could come in and play the role and plug in. They're not panicking because they've already had the foresight of bringing in a 2nd-round draft pick in Aaron Banks and having a guy like Brendel that they really are excited about be on the team for a couple years without ever having to play. So I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, and I just want to say this. At the beginning of the offseason, I said that I have more trust for this regime than I ever had. And that still holds true, right? I don't want to go back on that, but I also don't want to just give blind trust, right? Just because I think that would be unjust of me. If I'm thinking something, I got to stay true to that thought. And so even though I do trust, and that's why I put it at a 4, right? But based off of what you're saying, I just want to push back a little bit on some of those things. And I think it makes for good. I think it makes it makes for good conversation because I think that, people that are watching are basically on one side or the other, right? Some people are in full panic mode. I've heard it. I've talked to these people. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll end with this. If for some reason that offensive line ends up being the reason that they do not win, and I get it. Every team has holes, right? Every team has something they can improve on. The 49ers are no different. Stacked roster, they have an area that they can improve on. But unlike most teams don't have a golden ticket to go fix whatever that is that they are not great at. The 49ers have that golden ticket sitting right there in Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, and they have thus far not cashed in on a way to offset that, get rid of that, and go out and get maybe a veteran center if they are weak in that position and knowing that they're weak. Now, they may be completely happy with that position. They may be completely happy with the unit as a whole. And if they are, great. There's no reason to bring in somebody from the outside. But if there is a doubt at all throughout this process and they decide not to cash in on that ticket and it becomes a problem later in the season, that's where the scrutiny will come in. Because, again, every team has weaknesses, but most teams do not have that golden ticket sitting there. The 49ers do, and they're choosing not to cash in on it. And maybe it works out for them, but if it doesn't, they're opening themselves up to a lot of scrutiny because the answers were there, right?
I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. And from what Shanahan said in his presser, they're doing all of the math and doing all the calculations, and at least if you take them at his word, they're very comfortable with what they have right now.
For sure. And there's a lot of really good comments that I'm missing. I've been reading them all. You guys have been great, but I do want to get to this because this is some good news for the offensive line. Spencer Burford is whooping Eric Armstead, it sounds like, in practices early on, which is great, right? You never know with these things because it's a veteran who may be half-assing it, who knows? But there's been a lot of really good things about some of these kids that they did bring in, Burford being one of them. And the fact that he's showing out really, really early on is a great sign. And so that's the other thing. They haven't really, to the point that I made earlier, they haven't really addressed the center position in 6 years as far as having a mainstay. Now, maybe that answer is Brindle, like you said. Maybe that future answer is Wes, but they have done a fantastic job in drafting a lot of offensive linemen that fit an athletic profile and that are nasty and fit that team going forward. So they're doing a really good job of knowing, hey, this year it was Tomlinson that was going to be gone. It's cool. We got Aaron Banks. Next year it's probably McGlinchey. That's cool. We got Burford, right? So they've already trying to solve these problems proactively. And I think long-term, those things are great. I'm just concerned about this year right now with a quarterback that's going to be playing for a full season for the first time in his career. That's the only concern.
Yeah. I guess the only silver lining is the one center that Trey Lance is most comfortable that's in the NFL is Jake Brendel. So
for sure. And I am going to talk about that later. I purposely tried to slither out of that one because I am going to talk about that a little bit later of some of the takeaways from the press conference. But that is a very good point, and I agree with you 100%. That being said, 49ers throwback, as always, appreciate the hell out of you. A lot of people were talking about Creed Humphrey. Yes, he was an option last year. There's, yes, it sucks that they don't have Creed Humphrey on this team for sure. 9 drinks brings up a good thing. Rams with no O-line equals injured Stafford. I've witnessed it for years. Yes, the Rams offensive line is also not very good, or I should say a lot of question marks like the 49ers, right? Not necessarily not good, but a lot of question marks.
Thank you for correcting that.
22 minutes in. I did not expect to go that long on that topic. But that being said, let's actually get into some things that happened today. So mandatory OTAs happened. Deebo showed up. Great. Didn't do a lot of work, but he was there. Bosa, very similar. Didn't do a lot of work, but he was there. And Jimmy was asked to stay home to rehab his shoulder injury. Just in a nutshell, overall thoughts. You can talk about really anything else as far as OTAs go, but other than Lance, because that is the next topic. But anything that's on your mind, anything about those players in particular, what are your overall thoughts with that?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted about this, and it's been getting a lot of traction on Twitter, Jesse. And it's just, this whole offseason with the faithful and us being content creators in this space and kind of being, dealing with people back and forth about this. The biggest storylines were Deebo, is Deebo going to come back? Is he going to be there? And all this kind of stuff. Is Bosa going to be there? Or is he going to, want a new contract and all this kind of stuff? And is there going to be this quarterback competition with Jimmy and Trey and all this kind of stuff? It's just funny that they moved up training camp. So this is a last minute thing. Deebo decides to show up. Bosa decides to show up. And, they ask Jimmy to, continue his rehab, in LA. And, whether you want to read into that or not, it's just funny that the biggest question marks all kind of been quote unquote answered, at least day one in minicamp, where it seems like the path to bringing Deebo back is there. Bosa seems to be fine with whatever the situation. And more evidence that, Jimmy is no longer in the plans for the 49ers. It's just funny that it came full circle. We had a whole offseason of stressing, and then day one of mandatory minicamp, everybody we want to be there is there, and the people we don't want to be there aren't there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to somebody's point in the chat, Deebo showing up, I think it was Red Eye maybe, Deebo showing up just means that he wants to get paid. Right? Mm-hmm. That's really all that means. He doesn't want to be fined. Totally understand that. And that's exactly what it is. That's why he didn't really practice a lot. And even Shanahan addressed it, saying he's not going to ask him really even to do a lot because it doesn't make sense for him or the team based off of everything that's going on. That's fine. But it is nice to have him in the building. If for some reason he's still wanting out or he was holding firm on that, maybe just getting around the guys again and remembering why he loved it there so much, maybe that will be enough to kind of sway him back and get him in a little bit of a better mood before things get crazy. Bosa, I never actually questioned or thought that there was a possibility he wouldn't show up. So I'm glad that he was there as well. But Bosa's doing Bosa things. The only thing Bosa didn't do that Bosa normally does is show his abs today. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe he's not in as good a shape as what he wants to be. He's got one less ab or something. I don't know what's going on. But either way,
he's being conservative.
He is, yeah. That's fair. Exactly. There you go. Yeah, listen, Bosa being there was no surprise to me. Now, Jimmy not being there, again, yes, he's rehabbing, but this one actually was music to my ears because I think a lot of people do have the thought of, oh man, if Jimmy's there, they're going to compete. And Shanahan did address that, by the way, that if Jimmy's healthy, he does expect him to be there if he's not traded. He left the door open possibly to have him not show up, but that doesn't seem to be the case. That being said, it seems very, very clear at this point that it's Trey's job. There is not going to be a competition. If Jimmy's a part of this team, he's the backup quarterback, and that's what it is. And so that's kind of what I get from this. But I think it also is them doubling down on a couple weeks ago talking about how they are still looking for a trade partner for Jimmy Garoppolo. The fact that they've asked him not to come, that kind of tells you that they're very serious about this situation. So glad to hear it. Hopefully they can work out something soon that doesn't involve Jimmy being paid a single dime by the 49ers, because I don't think that they should pay him anything if it comes down to trading him as well. So Niner Sickness Podcast. What's up, Niner Sickness? How you doing, man? God bless you. Says, who takes Ford's old jersey number in your opinion? Wow. I mean, it's kind of a linebacker number, right? Like traditionally, but I don't know. I'll say this. Drake Jackson wearing 95 is a bit odd. I don't like that number, especially on a defensive lineman that doesn't play in the interior. Maybe he'll take it. Maybe it'll be Jackson. We'll see. But yeah, D Ford was another one. They addressed that situation. He's not going to be a 49er. They were pretty clear about that as well. So Interesting stuff. Niner Sickness, as always, appreciate you for tapping in. Let me show you some love, man. All right. Trey Lance is on fire. I can't do fire emojis on this thing, or I totally would. There'd be 38 of those bad boys waiting for you. But Lance has been on fire. I mean, we really haven't heard anything bad about Trey Lance from anybody. Everybody's talking about how good he is. He was 14 of 18 today with 2 drops, by the way. So he was probably would have been 16 of 18 if the receivers would have just hung on to the ball. One of those drops resulted in being an interception, but he also threw 4 touchdowns. They did some red zone deals and drills and whatnot. How are you feeling about Trey Lance? Is this good to hear? Are you holding judgment back until the pads are on and it's everybody's there? Like, just overall thoughts with Trey Lance? How are you feeling about things early on?
Terrible to hear, right? No, I mean,
trash.
Look, if the thing that's impressing me about Trey Lance the most is just how he's carrying himself in the pressers. It just seems like, this guy is meant for the job, right? He understands his role and, he's doing what he needs to do. I think, when it comes to these type of drills and listing numbers and stuff like that, take it with a grain of salt, right? Everybody's going, a lot of people are like, Trey threw 4 touchdowns, like he's on fire kind of right thing. But, Nate Sudfeld went 4 of 4 in those same drills and threw 4 touchdowns. So it's like, is Nate Sudfeld now competing with Trey Lance? Are those, now that Jimmy isn't going to be there and Brock Purdy isn't going to be there, is it going to be now, those guys talking about there's a QB competition between Sudfeld and Trey because, they threw the same amount of touchdowns in practice? Nah, I mean, I just think that, they're working on certain things. Obviously, it's good to see some of the progress that Trey's made. But I am reserving, what judgment as much as I can, saying that, Trey's going to combine for 40 touchdowns this season. But I still think that, we can't necessarily anoint him. He has to go through everything. And we're going to see a lot more when, his level of competition is much higher as far as, pads and everybody's going more full speed than they are right now. And but it's good to hear that in the role that he's playing right now, he's excelling, right? It would be much worse if he was struggling right now, but he's not struggling, but it's also, not hard at this point either. So, it's good. It's as good as it could be, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. But I want to clear this up because, all right, yes, it's set up for him to look good. It should be anyways, right? But not everybody performs well to this point. In fact, I got a lot of Jets fans upset with me. I made a video and posted it on Friday comparing Trey Lance to Zach Wilson as far as overall scrutiny goes with those two players. And a lot of Jets fans really came at me upset with the way that I broke it down. And my overall point of that video was that if Zach Wilson, who didn't look the best at times last year. Now, I know that he didn't have the weapons and all those other things, right? The video wasn't meant to crap on Zach Wilson as much as it was to say, why doesn't he get the scrutiny nationally that Trey Lance gets, right? Fan bases is one thing, but nationally, he doesn't get the scrutiny. Well, he struggled last year with some of his accuracy, right? And numbers show that. But he's also struggled early on in OTAs. Just like Trey Lance, this is the time to look good. This is the time without pads. This is the time when you should look your best. Trey Lance is doing much like he did in college, by the way, when everybody's like, well, he didn't play any competition. Well, he's doing the best he can do, almost perfect, when he should look perfect, right? Mm-hmm. That is encouraging. When you see someone like a Zach Wilson who's not doing that when he should look almost perfect, that's a cause for concern, right? But you don't hear about those things with a Zach Wilson nationally. But if it was Trey that was struggling, oh my gosh, the things that you would hear. So I don't want to go out of my way and be like, yeah, I told you so, Trey Lance. This is not the time to do that. But he's looking as good as he can in a time that he's supposed to look good. It's like when a team plays a bunch of crappy teams and they're undefeated and you're like, oh man, are they really good? Well, all they're doing is playing who's in front of them. That's what Trey Lance is doing. He doesn't make the schedule. He just plays who's in front of him. And right now he's doing it to perfection. And I love to see it. Trey Lance is showing a lot more than just stat wise and what he's doing. You're seeing the Titan throwing motion. His base looks better. His torso is much more aligned. Everything looks better. His release isn't as elongated. And you're seeing the comfortability and the leadership come through in every situation when he's either talking or his teammates are talking about him. Everything is going according to plan. So far, so good is what I would say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say his decision-making is better. There's a lot of positives to glean from it. I just think, the reason why nationally he gets more than, a guy like Zach, it's just because of the expectations of the team, right? Nobody expects the Jets to go anywhere this season, but the 49ers have a Super Bowl capable team. So obviously the head of that is going to have a lot of scrutiny, and that happens to be Trey Lance at this point. So it's good that even under all of that scrutiny, all of that pressure, he's still coming out, answering questions with confidence, a smile on his face, and cracking jokes. He even did the thing about Grant, which I thought was hilarious. And yeah, I mean, overall, I'm extremely excited that that's the quarterback I get to be cheering for this season because, of everything that we've seen, he just seems like a very likable guy, a guy that I'd want to be behind or get behind as far as cheering for. And, I hope he shows out because, I think we have a good one.
Yeah, I would say so. Nothing has made me change my mind about Trey Lance. Let's just put it that way, right? Like I'm feeling more and more confident as the reports come out about loving Trey Lance early on in the process. So that's where I'll leave it. But yes, until it's actually shown on the field, this is great, but we've got to see it on the field. That's totally fair to also say that. All right. Presser takeaways. You just alluded to it a little bit. You talked about Trey Lance talking a little bit with Grant, having a little bit of fun with him, which, by the way, this is 2 in a row now, right? This one, he had a little bit of fun with Grant, talking about the throwing motion and the slow motion video and all that stuff, which I disagree with Trey. He certainly has done something to work on that throwing motion. It looks different and for the better. That being said, last time we saw him in front of the media, he basically said his job is to not give an F about what you think. And so I love it. I love the confidence. He's very polite, very well spoken, super comfortable in his skin. Love to see it. What were some of your takeaways today from the press conference?
Yeah, so I had a few. I mean, let's start with obviously Shanahan was first.
Let's go back and forth. So let's go player by player.
Sure.
And
let's do that.
So Shanahan first.
So let's go Shanahan. And I thought he was pretty coy with a lot of things. I mean, he's pretty blunt about D Ford. I didn't expect him talking about D Ford. He's like, yeah, D Ford is healthy, but he won't be on our team. It's like, wow. Okay. Tell us how you really feel, right? So, D Ford, he used trade Jimmy quite a few times as well, which I think, now he's confident in stating that, Jimmy, even though he can't say Jimmy, they won't cut Jimmy, but it seems like, they're going to cut Jimmy if he's not traded. But overall with Shanahan, I just think that he's pretty confident. Like, he doesn't seem rattled. Obviously he would have liked Alex Mack to be there, but I think he's pretty excited. He's pretty happy with what Brendel brings to the team. Seems like, they've made choices this season as far as why they have the type of roster that they have. They decided obviously to pack the cornerback room a little bit more this year. They, still focusing on D-line depth. Seem okay with what they have at offensive line. So overall, it just seems like he's pretty excited. The biggest things I took away was just getting more insight into the way he approaches a season. He talked a little bit about why he moved, practice up or mandatory practice up, why he usually cancels, a few other practices later on and stuff like that. So I just like when he talks football in the quote unquote nerd type way, because I really geek out on stuff like that. So that's what I like to see, is that version of Shanahan talking about X's and O's and geeking out on just like nerd football stuff.
Yeah, and Red Eye, I think we'll talk about this when we get to Trent, because he certainly was pro Jimmy. I took that a little bit differently than it sounds like maybe you are, but we'll talk about it. Yeah, so I wrote down like a phrase or a word, just an overall takeaway as I watched each one of them get on the podium and go through whatever it is that they were being asked. For Shanahan, I just wrote same old-ish. Like, he just seems so unbothered, right? It's the same old, whatever. We're going through the media stuff. Here we go. Half answer your questions, give you a nugget here or there. It was just the same old-ish. The few things that he talked about, he did say that Bosa and the 49ers have not talked contract at all, which I think was surprising to some, was not to me, because I've said all along that I thought if Bosa is who I think Bosa is, his team is very smart. He comes from money, so he's not in panic mode. If he waits until next offseason, that money only goes up. And based off of some of these contracts that we saw this offseason, wait until some of those new deals come into place and that money's even more. Bosa is smart, in my opinion, to wait until next offseason to try to get paid. Remember, different situation than what Deebo's in, because he is locked in for 5 years. Deebo's only locked in for 4. So there is no rush unless Bosa's outright just trying to get paid right now. for him to go out and get paid. I feel like he's the type of player, and watching the way that his family's handled things in the past, that he's the type of guy that will bet on himself. And so the fact they haven't talked contract at all, not surprising to me. Maybe they plan to, maybe they will work something out. But as of now, that's kind of the way that I expected things to go with Bosa. He talked about D4, like you said. He talked about the Mack retirement, how they had a plan. They knew this was coming, which looking back on it, I think we were kind of unsure and as fans hoping that Mack was going to be there. We said a lot of things like, well, no news is good news. Well, it turns out they probably knew for a while, but they were waiting until that post June 1 to make the announcement because they needed to move some money around and things like that. So that being said, seems to me that they probably went into the draft knowing most likely that Mack was not going to return. And so they had a plan based off of that. And then again, he talked a little bit about Jimmy. You already touched on that. Let's move on to Trey. I'll go first this time. The one word that I would say with Trey Lance that I took away from him talking was continuity. And what I mean by that is he talked a lot about Clay Kubiak being the guy that was really hands-on with him last year and really helped him while he was on the scout team last year. And he talked a lot about him and Jake Brendel. You talked about this earlier, and this is where I wanted to circle around back to that. Him and Jake Brendel working together all last season as well. He talked a lot about those two specifically and the continuity that they have, which is great. So if Brendel's not the most talented guy, at least they've got the continuity. Obviously, we know that Scangarello was more Jimmy's quarterback coach, but the guy that was working with Trey Lance was a guy who's the assistant quarterback coach still in Clay Kubiak. And so it's good that he has that same guy going forward to be comfortable with as they work through this. And then the last thing is, I heard a lot of people talking about Tom House working with Trey Lance this offseason. I never actually heard that in talking to his personal quarterback coach and Sean McAvoy. So I was a little skeptical of that, but people were saying it was happening. They asked him specifically who he worked with, and he did not mention House at all. He actually mentioned Beck and then McAvoy and Quincy Avery. So that's kind of what I thought the game plan was all along. It sounds like he confirmed that, and House, to my knowledge, was never a part of things, although people talked about it possibly being the case. So those were my takeaways with it. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, biggest thing with Trey is just poise, man. Like, it seems like he's been doing this for such a long time. Like, he doesn't seem like this is his first time with media. I think he talked a lot about things that I took away, I guess, was, how much of an influence Greasy is on him, not only with the stuff on the field, but how to handle himself off the field. Just the grasp of understanding what he's going to be asked to do. And I think that, to me, is something I'm excited about, because it doesn't seem like he is undervaluing or underplaying or like doesn't know what is expected of him. I think he understands the pressure that he's under, and he's preparing himself in the proper way. Like, he doesn't sound immature at all. He doesn't sound like he has any kind of quote unquote red flags that maybe you see with guys that are younger. Like, it just seems like he's going to be a great leader, and somebody who, if he doesn't succeed, it's not going to be because he's not working hard enough. He's not trying hard enough. It's going to be just for, lack of, he's just doesn't have the ability to be that great, but he's doing everything as far as his controllables to be the best player that he could be. And I think I'm getting a sense of that more and more through these kind of conversations that he's having with the media.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great takeaway. Kelts, my guy Kelts, one of the few that I know that was on Trey Lance. Even when we were at Pick 12, he was on Trey Lance. Kelts, love you, my man. Becoming a member of the channel, appreciate you. And then it looks like Niner by Nature re-upping his membership as well. He says, should we be worried about Trey Lance's deep ball? It seems like everybody else is. I'm not worried about his deep ball because I've seen him throw a good deep ball in college, right? He was great at throwing over the shoulder deep balls in college. I'm not worried about it at all. Again, a little bit of a tweaked or a reworked throwing motion. It's going to take some time. Plus, you got to remember, these are the first practices. So a lot of times you're not necessarily on the same page with a lot of these guys, knowing their speed. You're not working a lot of the times with even starting wide receivers. So it's guys that you've never really kind of worked with and figured things out. And so their game speed versus what your expectations are can all be a little bit different. I'm not worried about it at all. Really, actually, for me, most of the game is played 30 yards and under. That's 90% of your game comes from that. And it sounds like he's mastering that. So if he can master that and then continue to work on the deep ball and the continuity with those guys for that other 10% of his game, he'll be totally fine. It's the over the middle stuff, the under 30 yards. That's what I'm looking for him to really take control of. And it sounds like he's absolutely on fire in that area. And that is very, very encouraging to me. So no, I'm not worried about it at all. All right, let's talk about Trent Williams. For me, the word or phrase that I wrote down for him was veteran. I mean, the guy was just so savvy up there. He knew how to heap praise on every single teammate, make him sound like $1 million. He was asked about Jimmy and talked about how much he loved Jimmy. Again, let's be clear about this. Jimmy is not the best football player, right? Starting level quarterback, mediocre at best as far as a starter goes. But that doesn't mean that Jimmy's not a good guy and people don't like Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy is a good teammate. I think we've said that here many, many times. That team loves Jimmy Garoppolo as a person. And so to see him say those things about Jimmy is no surprise. I think if you would have asked anybody about Jimmy, they probably would have lit up in the same way because they like Jimmy as a teammate. Jimmy is a great teammate. There's nothing wrong with him as far as that goes. It's just time to move on. That's really all it comes down to. The team knows what it is. They know exactly who the quarterback is. They know it's not Jimmy, but they like Jimmy. And there's nothing wrong with that. They should like Jimmy. If he was a great teammate, like everybody talks about, they should. He talked a lot about how smart Brendel is, which is great to hear again. So yes, he heaped a lot of praise on his teammates, talked about how smart Brendel is. One thing that this was probably the biggest takeaway though, even in his professionalism and his veteran takes, he was asked about Deebo. And I had to listen to this one a couple times. I didn't take it as a slight towards Deebo, but when asked about Deebo, he said he's grabbing the situation by the horns. He's showing his maturity by showing up. That tells me that take it for what it is. But to me, I look at that and him saying, yeah, maybe he didn't handle it the best early on. Maybe some of that social media stuff was not necessarily warranted. He doesn't need to take my advice. This is his journey. But now he's doing the right thing, showing his maturity, and he's showing up. That's the way that I kind of took that one. Not a slight or a dig at Deebo, nothing intentional. But I think in a roundabout way, he was kind of telling me, like, I wouldn't have handled it that way. That's just me. What were your thoughts with Trent Williams?
Yeah, I mean, Trent Williams to me is the best talent at his position that we have on the team. And that's with Nick Bosa on the team as well, like, and Fred Warner and Deebo and all these kind of things. As far as the best player we have at his position, to me, is Trent Williams. And somehow after this presser, Jesse, I was like, man, this guy's underrated, because I don't think people understand the amount of leadership he brings to this team as well, which was probably the biggest knock on him, right? When a lot of people, when he first was brought over, people always thought, okay, his play on the field is one thing, but he doesn't seem like a leader. He's to himself. He doesn't, all of these narratives that were created. Now that we see him and he seems healthy, he seems like in such a great mental space. He seems like he's in a place where he feels wanted, and he's reveling in that, man. The way, like you said, he handled it like a pro. He sounds, extremely smart. in the sense that he knows every aspect of what's going on. And then on top of that, the humility. Like, this is the best player we have, Jesse, and he's over here being like, the brains of the operation is the center position. And some guy that's never really started in the league, he's over here being like, yeah, the brains is Jake, and Jake's gonna be great. Like, he's very smart and all this kind of stuff. It's like, dude, do you know who you are, Trent? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're what's saving this offensive line in many people's eyes, and you're over here passing praise to other people. And to me, that's just the sign of a great leader. And he spoke about it. He's like, they asked the question about Trey. Does he, is he a good enough leader? And, I loved his answer, even though maybe some people could read into it. And if they want to create the narrative that they don't think Trey could be that guy. He said it, look, we don't need Trey to be that guy because they have me, we have Fred Warner, we have George Kittle. It's our job to be able to do that. But Trey can be that guy. And for him being 21 and handling himself the way that he's handling it, it says a lot about what this kid is capable of. And I like that, right? When I think when Trent Williams says something, he's thoughtful about it. He's not just throwing it out there. So when he praises somebody, I'm actually listening to that more because he's not going to oversell somebody unless he actually believes it. And that's something that I admire from him and took away from his interview the most.
Extremely smart. Great leader. All of that was very, very clear. And yeah, he basically said Trey is a leader, absolute leader. He was a leader. He even went back to Trey's presser, his moment in the presser where he said, I'm kind of surprised to hear that he wasn't necessarily comfortable, essentially, because he looked very comfortable in the locker room to us. Like, he was a leader last year, even though he wasn't playing, right? But he also said it's not essential that a quarterback is a leader because you do have leaders in this locker room like myself, like Fred, whoever he said, Fred Warner and whoever else. And so, Kittle. And so, he named himself a leader, but he also said, Trey Lance is absolutely a leader. He's been a leader since day one, even though he's young. And just because he's the quarterback, he doesn't necessarily have to be that because we have leaders in place, but he is a leader. So absolutely agree with you. Before we get into our final couple topics, we're going to get into Charvarius Ward here in a second, and then we're going to get into our final topic. But before we get there, there's 135 of you watching. Two things real quick. One, I've already started working my butt off for you guys for the season. I'm already booking content creators for each week of the teams that we are playing so that we can have a good show and break down the games the Wednesday before each game this year. So already getting that taken care of and in control for you guys. So if you're not subscribed, please make sure that you do so. And if you're not a member, would definitely encourage you to become one if you want some extra content. Suneil is also a content creator himself. He doesn't just come here for fun. He's got his own channel, although I think he does kind of low-key
come here for fun. Yeah, absolutely.
But he has his own channel, and the link is in the description, so make sure you subscribe to that. All right, let's get on to these final couple topics. Charvarius Ward. I'll let you go first this time, so I don't take your thunder. What did you think about Charvarius?
Swag. My word for him is swag daddy. Because Charvarius Ward is, he is the epitome of alpha best player on the team. Like, I'm sure he had the same personality in high school, same personality in college, and now he's the same dude in the NFL. And I'm all about it. I like the praise that he's, bestowed on some of the players, especially guys like Ayuk and Jennings. One of the things that he said that I was, was like, he's like, look, you could tell what Brandon Ayuk is bringing. He could be wide receiver 1 on this team if he puts some things together. So once again, not just outright praising somebody, but also giving some constructive feedback and qualifying why he says what he says. I like that he's kind of the big brother in the room because of, his ability or how many years he's played at a high level in this league. But obviously he had the line of the press conference when they asked him about Patrick Mahomes. And he was like, they're both two really good light-skinned quarterbacks. And I thought, like, just swag daddy, man, like throwing it out there, just being like throwing that little light-skinned jab at, those two quarterbacks. So I just think he's going to be fun to cheer for. I know some people look at that, and I think maybe his personality rubs some type of people the wrong way. For me, I'm used to growing up and being around, that type of energy. So it was fun to see, and just the authentic Charvarius Ward, man. I'm a big fan of his for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. 49ers throwback. It's actually going to be Thursday this week because the Warriors play tomorrow. So don't want to be on when the Warriors play. Let a lot of you guys who are Warriors fans go ahead and pay attention to them. That's really where your attention should be, right? Like, this is a big deal. So Grant and I will be back on Thursday right after Hammer and Nails over on Jack's channel. So that being said, I came away with man's about his business. Like that, very, very simple, right? No nonsense. Like, I'm here. You can tell he gets kind of bored with some of the questions, but at the end of the day, you can tell he's already a good teammate. He's already a good leader. I don't know how you can't like him. I mean, he is super authentic. And I absolutely loved for every single hater out there that still thinks Jimmy Garoppolo's the guy. No. Charvarius Ward's letting you know Trey Lance is him. He's QB1. He was very, very clear about that. Love to see it. It's funny because you feel like Ward's probably the guy that they get trained on how to handle the press and, hey, do say this, don't say that. Everybody else is, giving compliments to Jimmy and giving compliments to Trey, and we're not going to try to give too much. Now, Charvarius Ward's like, QB1, that's Trey Lance. That's what
right.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. All right. Let's move on to the last topic at hand. Top 5 coaches in the NFL. I want to know if you think Kyle Shanahan is there, and if not, how close is he? But the reason this is coming up is because PFF is at it again with their nonsense. I don't know what this list was about, but according to their rankings, Cliff Kingsbury was number 4 on their list. I don't know what the hell that was about, but Bill Belichick was 1, John Harbaugh 2. I'll just, because we're running up on the hour here, let me just go through these quickly, and you tell me if Kyle Shanahan is better or worse than these guys, and then we'll figure out where he falls, okay? Mm-hmm. Bill Belichick, you agree, number 1?
He's in the top 5 for sure, yeah. 1.
Okay. Harbaugh? John Harbaugh?
Top 5.
Okay. Andy Reid?
Top 5.
Cliff Kingsbury?
Not even top 10, bro.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Not even close. All right. Pete Carroll?
He could be. I don't think that's a stretch. Because, I mean, he's had a lot of success in Seattle. Obviously won a Super Bowl, been to another Super Bowl. So it's going to be how bad of a fall off it is without Russ. But, I could see him in somebody's top 5 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of the Soulja Boy gif. Cliff? That's how I took that one. Cliff? Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know what Cliff's doing there. All right, Matt LaFleur.
Nah, he's close, but he's not top 5 to me. He hasn't won anything yet.
Okay. Mike Vrabel?
Nah.
They have Vrabel at 8, by the way.
Yeah. I wouldn't say. I think not yet.
Okay. Here's 2 names that they don't even have in their top 10 that we need to get to because I don't know what the heck they were thinking. First of all, Sean McVay.
Should be in their top 5.
Okay. And Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin, to me, is the most underrated coach in the league. He's definitely top 5 in my books.
Okay.
So I could tell you my top 5.
Go ahead. Go.
Belichick. Belichick is 1. The rest of the 4 you could put in whatever order.
Right.
So Belichick, McVay, Tomlin, Andy Reid, and John Harbaugh would be my 5.
I agree with you. The order doesn't really matter. I agree with you. That's the top 5.
I don't understand how Dallas's coach was there.
Dude,
he obviously had a lot of success in Green Bay, but not recently, right? But to go back to your original question with Shanahan, I think Shanahan is in that 6 to 10 range, right? Outside looking in, still not top 5 because even though he's had a lot of success, hasn't been able to get over the hump. Those guys in the top 5 have all won a Super Bowl. And I think that if Shanahan wins a Super Bowl, I think that he's going to be, fighting for that top. I don't know if he jumps over anybody quite yet, but he's probably going to move up to 6 with the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would say those top 5 are kind of tier 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next tier is probably 3 coaches for me. And I would say Shanahan, probably Vrabel, and Pete Carroll would be my 3 in that next
I like
tier.
the guy out of Buffalo too, man. He's been doing a lot of great things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he that's fair. McDermott, yeah, he's up there.
You look at what he's been able to do as far as the development of Josh Allen and just the competitiveness of that team from going from, he's very similar to Kyle Shanahan, to be honest, as far as, taking a team that wasn't winning too often and then making them a perennial contender, still not quite over the hump kind of thing. So I would say there's a lot of similarities there between McDermott and Shanahan. We're just closer to Shanahan, so that's why we obviously pull his way.
Yeah, and Ryu Ken makes a great point. We were talking about Tom House earlier. He says Beck works under Tom House. I've heard in the podcast that Beck was on the House. Yeah, basically things are transitioning to Beck. That's fair, but he didn't work necessarily with House. And the reason that I would say that's probably the case is because Quincy Avery is the one who runs that camp. Coach McAvoy, who we've had on the show 3 separate times, I believe, is basically Quincy Avery's right-hand man, a lot like Beck is to House. He doesn't mention House and Beck. He just says Beck. So same principles, right? But not necessarily Tom House. But I totally understand what you're saying. That's a great point. A lot of the same principles for sure. Yeah, I think moral of the story is Shanahan's a top 10 coach, not quite top 5, but he's close, right? He wins a Super Bowl. I'm putting him ahead of McVay. That's me personally.
Wow. Yeah, I think the only reason why McVay, to me, kind of still has a little bit over Shanahan is just his record through the regular season, right? He's never had that down that Shanahan said. Now, on the other hand, he did inherit a better roster than Shanahan did initially, so maybe you could argue it that way. But the head-to-head, obviously, it's criminal out here in the streets, some of our takes. But it's debatable, right? The head-to-head and all that kind of stuff does give you an opportunity to put Shanahan above.
Yeah. I think he's right there. If he wins, like I said, I'm putting him there. But sounds like we're on the same page with this. Shanahan's certainly a top 10 coach at the very, very least. I don't know what they're doing with Cliff Kingsbury. He's not a top 10 coach. Absolutely crazy. Somebody made a great comment earlier that if you didn't have to complete a season, Cliff Kingsbury is the best coach in the league. Yeah, through 7 games, Cliff Kingsbury is the deal for sure. All right, y'all. Listen, Suneil's got to get out of here. That's the end of the show. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Looks like we got one more before we get out of here. Why isn't Suneil allowed on Grant's show anymore? I don't know if he's not allowed. They don't work together. That's for the birds. That's for another day. I
love Grant. There's no animosity or anything.
Yeah, there's no exactly. Yeah.
Like, you kind of put it up there like maybe there's some beef. No, there's no beef between me and Grant. Like, I don't need to be on that radar, dude. Grant's been going hard at Kinlaw, at Pat McAfee. I don't need So Real Sports Talk on Grant's radar in a negative way, but it's just about scheduling and timing. Most of my free time is in the evenings. Grant's pretty booked up in the evening type shows, and during the day I'm at work, so I can't get on his channel. But a lot of love for Grant. There wouldn't be me in this space if it wasn't for guys like Grant and obviously Jessie here. So appreciate it, man. You didn't have to spend $2 to ask that question.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. But we appreciate each and every one of you. But that being said, go like and subscribe to Suneil's channel. I made it easy for you. The link is in the description. Just go show him some love. He gives us his time every single Tuesday right here on Last Second Sports. And until next time, peace.